I didn't speak to him. Rich Paul reveals he was furious when LeBron James joined the Miami Heat. RP proclaims himself to be Bron's biggest critic of all time. It is often assumed that whenever LeBron James finds himself at the center of controversy in the NBA, his longtime friend and agent Rich Paul is among the first to come to his defense. However, according to RP himself, that perception is largely inaccurate. In fact, the 45-year-old described himself as James' biggest critic, a role he had consistently embraced throughout their professional relationship. So much so that Paul even admitted that he was initially not a big fan of James joining the star-studded Miami Heat to chase his first championship ring. Even though that move was monumental for LeBron's career. Paul on why he wasn't on board with James joining Miami. Speaking on the recent episode of the Game Over podcast, Paul revealed how he perceived James' move to Miami to be unnecessary, given that at the time, LeBron was one of the leading faces of the league. Rich believed that forming a super team that early in his career could evidently hamper LBJ's reputation and overshadow his individual greatness. However, after giving the move some thought, Paul's view eventually evolved. Put simply, he understood that James' decision was way more than basketball success. It was a statement about the growth of player empowerment, about how an athlete could finally control his narrative and hold leverage in a system where players were thrown from one franchise to another regardless of their loyalty or effort level displayed. I'm the biggest LeBron critic of all critics. I'm the one I did not like him going to Miami. D. Wade told this story. I didn't speak to him and Chris Bosh at all. I was furious, but I was wrong. Paul said, "You don't get to choose where you're drafted, right?" In most cases, most athletes aren't evaluating all things because they don't have the autonomy. When you become the player that the market is the league, meaning all teams want me, that takes a different approach towards everything. If you get there and you're not recognizing the opportunity, that's on you. Mindset is a true luxury. Do players exploit that leverage? In many ways, Paul's reflection is valid. James demonstrated that a generational player, or at least a superstar at that point, could finally take ownership of his career and shape his legacy on his own terms. However, in today's NBA landscape, that same empowerment has, at times, been taken to extremes. Modern examples demonstrate players leveraging their influence to compel exits when organizations no longer align with their personal vision or comfort. For instance, situations such as James Harden repeatedly engineering moves to new teams, or even younger players effectively sitting out under the cloak of injury until traded, have become increasingly common. While it is undoubtedly positive that players now have greater control over their careers, there must also be reasonable limits. It is safe to say that without balance, the very empowerment that once symbolized progress risks being perceived as exploitation, as teams are left stranded on several occasions.